So a little bit briefly about my work, if you haven't been too familiar with it. My qualitative work is about finding people who exhibit agency and then trying to go back and figure out how they did. And grit plays a large role in this project of mine. So I've been interviewing about 45 different students in New York. All of them have come from very low-income households, many from single-parent households. Some people have been formerly incarcerated, undocumented, or have experienced homelessness. Some people have experienced violent or sexual trauma or have overcome significant drug abuse problems or have had parents who have had to do that. And yet today, the people in my sample are all very academically and or professionally successful by standard means. So my question is that Tupac question: how did this happen? And so just focusing on mentorship and opportunity for today, I think it's really important to think about social capital and cultural capital for two reasons. Social capital to help students expand their worldview so they can have a better idea of formulating goals that are specific to them, and they can also foster their own help-seeking behavior. So oftentimes we see that these kids really struggle for just asking for help. So that's how we would address that. And cultural capital to aid the execution of goals eventually, like learning professional email etiquette. And the way in which that can be done is by offering cultural competency for students to use outlets for these new skills. So if you happen to see that quote yesterday, I use this one as an example of poor cultural competency. The one where the Hispanic student said that his teacher called on him to be a representative of Hispanic culture wherever anything happened. That's kind of the opposite of what I'm talking about here. So that kid came from a broken home. He was homeless for a lot of his life, and his aunt took him in so that he could go to schools in New Jersey. And you know, if you asking a kid from a broken home about what's family dinner like, just thinking about how you immediately lost a genuine relationship with that student. So that's not what we're looking to do, but I will talk about one example of this in action. So this is kind of like a wonderful success story, and this doesn't have to happen exactly in every school with every teacher-student relationship, but I just want to give you one example of how this could work. So John is also someone who you read quotes from yesterday. John is also his alias. He went by J Stud, the kid who was originally tracked into special ed. J Stud is his MC name. So he was originally tracked into special ed as an elementary school student, but eventually, through the attention of one teacher who took an interest in him, she detracked him from special ed. But he still struggled up until high school with academics. So this is kind of his network, his high school network. And if you read the quote about how his music teacher saw his love for hip hop, that's existing cultural competency that he had, is this ability to rap and put words together and create and compose. And so the teacher noticed this. So sometimes it's just noticing what are students experts in and giving value to that. And she used that to make him go to class as a motivator. And then by going to class, she said she would open up for him a pathway into a music studio that she had access to for an internship. I don't know if it was paid or unpaid, but he definitely spent a lot of summers there. And what he learned while he was there, and this is his network changing now, he learned while he was there is that he was actually interested in finance. He liked the financial aspect of the recording studio. Go figure. So that relationship actually helped him get another internship at a bank. I think originally he was at Lehman Brothers. He had the tendency to get out of there. And eventually he found his way into JP Morgan. He had finished his associates during this time of the studio network, but not quite his bachelor's, and JP Morgan helped him get his bachelor's, and he's still working there today. So again, I'm not saying every teacher needs to do this for every student, but if a math teacher finds a few students, that, especially the ones that need it the most, and does it with them, and then the English teacher finds some of theirs, PE teacher finds some of theirs, then we kind of have this community approach to try to increase agency for all of our students. Again, I think it starts with agency. You find the passion, use the passion, and then we can get to grit. Okay, so let's personify this. So I shared a lot of quotes with you yesterday, but I kept one to myself because I love this one and I didn't want to share it yet. So this is a quote from, we'll call him Tyreek, is a guy who was arrested for armed robbery. He was raised by a single mom. And he was straight-laced until after high school, where he started hanging out with the wrong crowd. Liked these guys. And they pulled off an armed robbery, were sentenced to 6 years that he spent at Rikers and Greenhaven, which is upstate in New York. And yet somehow today he has a master's degree in social work. He's a manager at an advocacy organization for successful reentry. So how did this happen? So these are the types of people in my sample. So this is a quote I'll read to you that he said to me. They say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But it's scarier when you lead a horse to water and they say, what water? I was the horse who didn't see the ocean in front of me. It's not a conscious decision. I really am ignorant to the fact that what is in front of me is water. All of that said, when we talk about changes that we want to make to a system, it's with our understanding that these are good changes, but that may not be how it's interpreted. In every story, we have to understand the person may not see that this is a good option. The person may not even understand that this is water they're looking at. So this quote, I think, is directly related to goal formation and how you can think about how you can get your students to form goals. You may not necessarily come from the same background, and this is interesting. We were sitting at a table yesterday with Glenn over there, and Glenn told a story about how in 11th grade he had to go through forceful desegregation, and how that actually hurt him at first academically because his previous teachers took an interest in him and his new teachers didn't, and Glenn's partner felt like he had nothing to share that could match that. But we both probed, and eventually the man was able to tell us something really, really touching about his own life. And so people may think that cultural competency is some really complicated thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It doesn't have to be that complicated to start to show someone the water. Another thing that I think is really important about this quote is the second half. I guess kids these days would say that this man is very woke. It's funny that he talks about people and power. So that could be in schools when people are at the DOE, and I've been at the DOE before, making top-down legislation. It could be within schools, principal deciding for teachers, for classrooms. So even though, and this is, I don't know if I mean this, we won't go there, but politicians, if they try to enact policies that they think they have our best interest in mind, their lack of actually seeing how that operates on the ground might be what keeps them from being able to actually enact that. That's a very Freirean concept. To liberate a student, you need to know their praxis, their specific point of action and reflection. And if you don't, then you're just playing into your power position. And that's kind of what scares me about the Betsy DeVos thing. Okay. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, she probably has some experience in schools, public schools. I don't know. So how did Tyreek start to see the water? So these are some quotes that explain that. My first year, although I realized it wasn't what I wanted, I hung around the same character type of people who weren't looking to progress themselves. I was around some dangerous people, man, making stupid choices, carrying weapons. About a year into my incarceration, there was a guy who had done a tremendous amount of time running a college program. I didn't realize what the value of college was. He told me, "You're going down this road I've been on 10 times already, and it never ends well." So this older guy saw Tyreek, who even to this day kind of has a baby face, and he looks young, and wanted to make a difference in his life. And he approached him and told him to join this college mentoring program. And at first, he was reluctant, and the man persisted, and so he joined the program. And in joining the program and mentoring these teens, as a 22-year-old, he started to think about his own legacy, and he saw his own mistakes and possibilities in the kids. And so then he started joining other prison programs and taking college credit courses, eventually building up enough credits to be able to get his bachelor's after he got out of prison. This is a story about in prison. When I got my first A, I questioned my professor afterwards. "Why'd you give me this A? I thought she was being nice. We're in prison, so she's being easy on us." She said, "No, Tyreek, I gave you that A because it was a good paper." It was one of those moments I look back on in my incarceration, and my empowerment just grew. So I think this is really relatable to a lot of the educators in the room. I mean, first of all, agency can benefit from kindness, but it can also benefit from tough love. And students know if you're being genuine or not genuine about the grades they get. So if you've been hard enough on someone and you have actually seen them do well enough to get an A, that is an experience that can be really formative for the teacher and the student. And so my point here is basically just that if that can happen in prison, it can probably happen in school. So school, that's the whole point, right? How can it happen in schools? Well, enough of this sociology mumbo jumbo. This is my last slide. Sorry, I don't have a conclusion slide, so I hope you were paying attention. So this is how I think some of this work can be done in schools. So I will throw a little bit more literature at you first. It's called the Rosalind Michelson Framework on Educational Attitude. And I think it's a really simple concept, but it should be both motivational and hopefully it can help you in your work in some way. So Rosalind Michelson finds that all students have two attitudes towards school. All students have an abstract view towards education, which is aligned to our dominant narratives of what education should be and can be, that anyone can pull themselves up by the bootstraps, that education works for everyone and gives people equal opportunity. But then all students also have a concrete view of education, and that one is very related to their real reality. How far did my parents go in school? Are my friends staying in school or dropping out of school? What is the relationship I have with my teachers? So that's the concrete view of education. And she found that educational attainment is much more closely correlated to students' concrete views. And students with disadvantages, or students from disadvantaged backgrounds, students of color, tend to have a large disparity between their abstract and concrete views. So the point is that even though all students may be able to see school as working, they may not be able to see it as working for them. So that's a little bit sad, but it should also be motivational. How can we get students to make education relevant to them? And I think, well, I have a few schools that I think are doing this work well in New York, but I'll talk about one of them, and that's the James Baldwin High School in Chelsea. James Baldwin is a transfer school in New York, transfer high school for students. 100% of students qualify for free and reduced lunch. 50% have aged out of the traditional DOE age range. They're basically there to get a second chance at their diploma. And it's another school that's 99% students of color, which I think just means 100. There's just like a data point issue there. So how does Baldwin bridge those two gaps? So they strengthen existing abstract views through their curricula. So through a process, they've actually been able to get around the Regents exams, and now their students take formative assessments. And any school that's thinking about it, I would highly recommend that process. So students now take year-long research projects per content area where they come up with a question, they write a 15 to 20-page research paper, it has to be presented in front of a panel and vetted in front of outside readers. There's a revise and resubmit process, and then they can kind of defend, which is what I'm trying to hope to do with my dissertation soon. We'll see. Also, the curriculum is also built around classes that the teachers want to teach and the students want to take. So they have classes, there's rubrics for all of these classes. They have Dracula and gender identity, Islamic art and mathematics, the creation and the abolition of racial slavery. So these are classes where the students can kind of really make sense of history and math given their own backgrounds. And as far as concrete views I think can be benefited in schools if you can kind of try to do the community model school thing where you bring in outside successful people. For students of color, bring in teachers of color and successful people in different industries to come and run workshops with your kids. And in one school I've seen a magazine editor come once a month and help students develop a magazine. That's Medgar Evers College Prep in Brooklyn. And a lot of times different artists and playwrights can help students do plays, musicians can come and help bring in those resources as well. So that's the thing, is like this work is hard. It's hard for schools to do on their own, but if you can engage outside partners and communities, like it shouldn't be that hard. And that's how I think we can get to agency and then grit. Thank you. Do we have time?